All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I am joined today by Vanita Gupta, the head of the Department's Civil Rights Division, and Director Ron Davis of the Community-Oriented Policing Service Office, or COPS. Now, as we all know, as we've all seen, over the past few days and weeks, we have watched as Baltimore has struggled with issues that face cities across our country today. We have seen the tragic loss of a young man's life. We have seen a peaceful protest movement coalesce to express the concern of a beleaguered community. We have seen brave officers upholding the right to peaceful protest while also sustaining serious injuries themselves during the city's unfortunate foray into violence. And we have watched it all through the prism of one of the most challenging issues of our time, the issue of police-community relations. When I traveled to Baltimore earlier this week, I had an opportunity to see the significant work that the city and the police department had done with the COPS office over the last 6 months through a collaborative reform process. But despite the progress being made, it was clear that recent events, including the tragic in-custody death of Mr. Freddie Gray, had given rise to a serious erosion of public trust. In order to address this issue, I have been asked by city officials and community leaders to augment our approach to the situation with a court enforcement model. I've spent the last few days with my team considering which of the Justice Department's tools for police reform best meets the current needs of the Baltimore Police Department and the broader Baltimore community. Today, the Department of Justice is opening an investigation into whether the Baltimore Police Department has engaged in a pattern or practice of violations of the Constitution or federal law. This investigation will begin immediately and will focus on allegations that Baltimore Police Department officers use excessive force, including deadly force, conduct unlawful searches, seizures, and arrests, and engage in discriminatory policing. The COPS office will continue to work with the Baltimore Police Department, and the collaborative reform process will now convert to the provision of technical assistance to the Baltimore Police Department. Now, some may ask how this differs from our current work with Baltimore Police Department. And the answer is, rather than examining whether the police department violated good policies, we will now examine whether they violated the Constitution and the community's civil rights. This approach has been welcomed by the Baltimore City Fraternal Order of Police, and I want to thank them for their support and their partnership as we move forward. Now, in the coming days, Civil Rights Division attorneys and investigators conducting the investigation and the police experts who will assist them will be engaging with community members and with law enforcement. We will examine policies, practices, and available data. And at the conclusion of our investigation, we will issue a report of our findings. If unconstitutional policies or practices are found, we will seek a court-enforceable agreement to address those issues. We will also continue to move forward to improve policing in Baltimore, even as the pattern or practice investigation is underway. Our goal is to work with the community, public officials, and law enforcement alike to create a stronger, better Baltimore. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division has conducted dozens of these pattern or practice investigations to date, and we have seen from our work in jurisdictions across the country that communities that have gone through this process are experiencing improved policing practices and increased trust between the police and the community. In fact, I encourage other cities to study our past recommendations and see whether they can be applied in their own communities. Ultimately, this process is meant to ensure that officers are being provided with the tools that they need, including training, policy guidance, and equipment, to be more effective, to partner with civilians, and to strengthen public safety. Now, for many people across the country, the tragic death of Mr. Freddie Gray and the unfortunate violence that did occur has come to personify the city, as if that alone is Baltimore. But earlier this week, I visited with members of the community who took to the streets in the days following the unrest to pick up trash, to clear away debris, and they are Baltimore. I visited with elected officials who were determined to help the neighborhoods that they love come back stronger and more united, and they are Baltimore. I visited youth leaders who believe that there is a brighter day ahead, and they are Baltimore too. And I also visited with law enforcement officers who had worked up to 16 days without a break. And they were focused not on themselves or even their own safety, but on protecting the people who live in their community. They too are Baltimore. Now, none of us have any illusions that reform is easy. The challenges that we face and that Baltimore faces now did not arise in a day, and change will not come overnight. It will take time and sustained effort. But the people that I met in Baltimore, from the protesters to the public officials to the officers, including one who had been injured amidst the violence, all were saying to me ultimately the same thing. I love my city, and I want to make it better. And that is why I'm optimistic about this process. And that's why I am actually hopeful about the days and weeks to come. And that is why I am confident that as a result of this investigation and the hard work that is still ahead, and make no mistake about it, it is hard work, all members of the Baltimore community, residents and law enforcement alike, will be able to create a stronger, a safer, and a more united city together. Thank you for your time and your attention, and this time I'd like to open it up for a few questions.
Apart from the request itself that came from the city, what have you seen or heard from residents of Baltimore that would lead you to believe that the ongoing Justice Department review would in fact need to be augmented? Is the progress not sufficient? Are the problems deeper than perhaps you had initially understood? Can you talk a little bit about why the Justice Department believes that the COPS review itself doesn't work or is not sufficient for this?
Certainly, and let me say at the outset that we believe very strongly in the collaborative reform process, and it has helped numerous communities and police departments across the country. But for collaborative reform to ultimately be effective, we really need to have that three-part base of support: police engagement, elected official engagement, and community engagement, and the ability to have faith in the process. Obviously, we've all seen events change in Baltimore and become much more intense over a very, very short period of time. And it was clear to a number of people looking at this situation that the community's rather frayed trust, to use an understatement, was even worse and has in effect been severed in terms of the relationship with the police department. So we felt that that was one factor in viewing whether or not we would literally be able to use collaborative reform to actually make the changes that we need. Also, as we look more at the issues facing the police department itself, in terms of the needs that they have and in terms of the issues the residents were raising, they essentially were much more serious and they were more intense than when we began the collaborative review process. And so we felt that the best thing to do was to conduct an investigation to see whether or not these issues arose to the level of federal civil rights violations, and if so, have the best model in which to address them, which in our view is a court-enforceable agreement.
Senator Mikulski yesterday made reference to a fractured trust between police and communities around the country, not only in Baltimore. And I wonder, from your standpoint, how serious that fracture is nationally.
Well, we've had a number of situations that have highlighted this fracture in various communities, in different parts of the country, cities of all sizes, issues ranging from people being harmed or unfortunate deaths in custody. So I think we see it when it occurs, but I think that the issue really goes beyond just the interaction between the police and the community, because we're talking about generations, not only of mistrust, but generations of communities that feel very separated from government overall. And so you're talking about situations where there's a flashpoint occurrence that coalesces years of frustration and anger. And that's what I think you saw in Baltimore when there was that unfortunate night of violence, and I think you see it in other cities around the country as well. You can't look at a city and predict what's going to happen. You can't look at a city and analyze it, and certainly we're not looking to do that. What we hope, though, is that our work, both through collaborative reform and past investigations, other cities can look at their own environments and decide what issues that they see and whether or not some of the work that's been done in the past can be brought to bear and help them as well. I'd actually point to the gentleman right behind you.
Will the department release any of the findings that the folks have found in a collaborative review, or will that information be folded into the pattern of practice?
The information is going to be folded into the pattern of practice investigation. Typically, however, when we do a collaborative reform effort with the police department, that usually does end in a report that is made public. Because we're now going to fold it into an investigation, we actually will not be having that collaborative reform report. There will be, however, a report at the end of the pattern of practice investigation that will draw on that.
This violence took place just as you were coming into office. As you saw it unfold, what was your reaction? What did you think?
Well, I have to say, I watched it, as did most people, through the prism of my television screen, but have seen similar incidents across the country. And I would have to say that my first reaction was profound sadness. It truly was. It was profound sadness for the loss of life, for the erosion of trust, for the sadness and despair that the community was feeling, for the frustration that I know the police officers were feeling also as they tried to encourage peaceful protests, but then had to deal with violence. And so I'd say my first reaction was profound sadness.
The FBI director and the Secretary of Homeland Security are having a teleconference today with the nation's police to talk about this growing concern over ISIS social media. How much of a concern is that? How urgent a concern is that for the Justice Department?
As we look into our national security cases, we have attempted to see which tools those who would seek to do Americans harm utilize. And so I think social media is certainly one that we've seen be used. In the cases that result in my old district, we've seen social media be used as a recruitment tool, as a means of disseminating information. So it is certainly an area that we try and stay on top of. But I would say it's part of the full panoply of things that we look at as we try and determine who's essentially trying to do us harm.
Yes.
I'm going to apologize for not knowing everyone's name right away. Otherwise, I would not simply be pointing to you in this manner. But yes.
Paula Reed, CBS News.
Paula.
So for the Garland Police Department, they said that they didn't have sufficient information that a threat was headed their way. And with the proliferation of these ISIS-inspired individuals here in the United States, how are you guys working to make sure that local officials are looped into the threats you guys are identifying at the federal level?
Well, what I can tell you is that when information is determined to generate a threat to any police department, we do provide them with as much information as we can. I think in this situation you saw there was an individual who had come under scrutiny before but had not been very active in the immediate past. And so the information that was provided was probably more limited than the Garland police would have liked or would have hoped to have seen. But certainly I know that all efforts were made to provide them with information, and in fact they were tremendously helpful in the results of the case and the results of the shooting that occurred.
And then the second one, put your hand up.
General Manager Carrie Johnson from NPR.
Carrie.
As you know, a lot of states and localities are looking to you and your department now to help heal that fractured trust between police and communities. That said, you only have so many resources to conduct these COPS reviews and pattern of practice investigations. Do you need more attorneys and investigators? Do you need the law to be changed to change the legal standard under which you can bring these civil rights cases?
Well, as I was on the Hill yesterday at my very first appropriations hearing, and of course we always ask for increased resources to handle the cases that we have and the ones that we anticipate coming down the pike. But to the larger issue raised by your question, which is, communities looking for help and resources, the Department of Justice is here to help, and we do try and be a resource. But the reality is we cannot litigate our way out of this problem, and it is not the department's intention to engage in an investigation or review of every police department across the country. It is rather our goal and our profound hope that the work that we have done will be a base for communities to look at and to build upon as they determine what issues exist in their communities. We now have a very solid body of reports, both collaborative reform and pattern of practice investigations. And I will say that one of the things I'm most pleased about over recent years has been the development that many of our investigations are begun very cooperatively in conjunction with law enforcement and elected officials. They reach out to us for assistance. They are not in the adversarial mode. We do have a few that may result in court action, but by and large, most of them have been under the environment of working very, very well with police and with community officials. So our hope is that other jurisdictions, cities large and small, can look at these reports and say, are these the issues that I face? What did the Justice Department see there? What is my police department doing that may look like this, or in fact may be a model for better behavior than this? One of the things that we try and do through the COPS process, before we even get to either collaborative reform or an investigation, is pair police departments up with their peers who have had successful work, particularly with police community relations. We have a whole range of services that we try and offer, from technical assistance to providing expert advice. So our goal is to be a resource and a guide, but not to be the hand reaching in to every police department, because we truly do believe that communities, cities, police departments, they know their cities best. They know what those issues and those problems are, and we want to help them reach the best solutions.
Hi, Eric Tucker with the Associated Press.
Thank you.
Much has been made about the different racial dynamics when you talk about Baltimore City versus Ferguson. And Ferguson, you had a police department that had a very few number of minorities. Obviously, the situation in Baltimore is very different. To what extent, based on that racial dynamic, are you anticipating that the problems in Baltimore will be different and perhaps less race-based in nature than what we encountered in Ferguson?
I think that regardless of the racial or ethnic makeup of any city, every city's different. Every police department is different, and they all present different issues. I think that policing is an extremely challenging profession at this time, no matter where you are. And I think that the issues facing Baltimore certainly do. Some people express them in racial tones, but people, to me, were expressing them more in tones of community leaders feeling frustrated, feeling pain, police department leaders feeling also frustrated at not being able to protect their city. So there really was a very strong commonality in what I heard in Baltimore that crossed races, that crossed professions, that crossed groups. So I think every city's different. And I don't want to prejudge or put that particular prism on Baltimore or any other city.
Hi, Lindsay Dunsmuir with Reuters.
Lindsay.
Senator Mikulski also yesterday asked that grant money to police forces be tied to mandatory training in racial and ethnic bias. Is that something that you'll actively consider?
We have a wide range of grant programs that assist state and local law enforcement, and many of those grants are specifically for training purposes. Many of them simply provide equipment and do other things. And so our approach has always been that rather than conditioning getting a grant on a particular program, we work with the jurisdiction to really focus on the specific need that they have, and then basically give them access to the training that they need, because the training for every department really is different. The requirements and needs are different for every department, but we're always considering ways to make our grant programs more efficient.
Attorney General Pierre Thomas, ABC News.
Pierre.
What more should the federal government be doing to deal with ISIS using social media in unprecedented ways? What more should the federal government be doing on the proactive level?
Well, I think that what I can say at this point is that we're certainly using all the tools available to us to determine how social media is being used. But as always, we have to balance that with with every individual's right to free speech, with privacy rights. Those are very, very important concerns. And so we have to balance that also with making sure that what we do does not interfere with the free flow of information for all law-abiding citizens, for example. So, I'm not able to give you the specific details of what the government is focusing on now, except to say that we are focusing on that as an issue. It's not a new issue. As I said before, we've seen social media being used in a number of cases, and it really is an expansion of how the internet has been used, frankly, for several years now, both in recruitment and radicalization of young people to join terrorist groups.
Take one more question.
Who has not asked a question? Who's not asked a question? Several hands are up now. Devin.
Can you explain to people why they shouldn't be concerned that the federal government was flying surveillance planes over Baltimore during the protest?
Well, I think that I did see that report. I think that someone came to me and said something about, were you flying drones over Baltimore? And I thought, well, I don't really have any drones, but leaving that aside, not particularly, no. No. No, it's actually not an uncommon practice for police helicopters to fly over to try and figure out where are people moving to or where might violence be breaking out and provide information down to the field, similar to officers on the ground providing surveillance reports as well. And so I don't think it was a new occurrence, and I think you see it in any number of cities. And it was for the limited purpose of finding out, were there pockets of violence and what could be done about that. Kristen was going to ask a question. You'll have to be the last one. So. And you are doing?
John Doman with WNEW Radio.
John.
Just the other day when the mayor was talking about asking you about the investigation, she was also touting a 46% drop in complaints about excessive force, 54% about just officers being discourteous. Is that any indication that things are already getting better? Is it a foundation for you, or is that just kind of out the window at this point?
No, I think all the data that's been gathered to date will factor into our investigation. It's really premature to say what that data means. I think we've all seen situations where you can have numbers that look great, but if you're the person who's involved in an unfortunate incident, for you, it feels like it's 100%. So, we'll be looking at all of those issues and incidents, but we'll be looking at the larger issues of whether or not the police, as they work to stop, arrest, and detain people, how they are, in fact, implementing their policies. We'll look at excessive force, the use and the guidance that they have and the training that they have already. So that will factor into our investigation. It's premature right now to say how it will impact on it. So, all right. Well, thank you all.